To overcome dissatisfaction and suffering, it is essential that we understand and accept the ever-changing, impermanent nature of life. We acknowledge the presence of dissatisfaction and suffering. We ever-changing, impermanent nature of life, we acknowledge the presence of dissatisfaction and suffering. We understand the very nature of suffering, and we embrace suffering compassionately, without fear or avoidance. The second noble truth, the cause of dissatisfaction and suffering. The second noble truth refers to the arising origin and cause of dissatisfaction and suffering. We desire, crave, and thirst for happiness, security, and identity in the world of impermanence. Influenced by our own misrepresentation, ignorance/delusion, we want life to satisfy our very craving and need and desire. We want from misrepresentation life what it can be never provide. Constant happiness, pleasure, and security undisturbed by change or loss. When we fail to satisfy our life needs and desires, we experience fear, frustration, hurt, anger, or suffering. Afflicted by such thoughts and emotions, we tend to speak and act in negative ways which cause further sufferings. Therefore, our dissatisfaction and suffering do not come just from outside of ourselves. We cause our own suffering when we fail to realize that the impermanent nature of life is incapable of providing constant satisfaction for our craving, need, and desire. The original cause of dissatisfaction and suffering in our misrepresentation of our craving and reality. Self-centered desire, craving, grasping attachment to things that do not last, and our negative of behavior. Insight into the second noble truth. To overcome dissatisfaction and suffering, it is essential that we clearly identify of this experience, we deeply feel and understand these causes. Finally, we choose to abandon, remove, and stop creating the causes of our suffering. The third noble truth, dissatisfaction and suffering. The third noble truth tells us that there is an end to our dissatisfaction and suffering when we let go of, abandon, and liberate ourselves from the delusion of craving and attachment that causes it. Because our pain and confusion and suffering have a cause, a beginning, they also have an end. Once we understand the nature of our illness, we can cure it with the right remedies. In the same way, once we see and understand what causes our suffering, we can bring an end to it by eliminating those causes and realizing well-being. Liberation for suffering, awakening, lasting happiness, supreme peace, and perfect wisdom are possible. These qualities are the very essence of our nature, of our being. They are always available within us, awaiting our realization, insight into the third noble truth. When our delusion, greed, craving, attachment, and negative behavior have been into the third noble truth and extinguished, what remains in this absence of suffering is the experience of nirvana, the awakened quality of true nature. It is essential, however, that this supreme peace and wisdom of our nature be realized and made fully conscious by the way of direct experience. For those liberated in this way, whose heart dwells peace, there is nothing for those to be added what has been accomplished. This is the end of dissatisfaction and suffering, the realization of our true nature, ultimate reality, and nirvana. The fourth noble truth, the path of leading end of dissatisfaction and suffering. The fourth noble truth is the way, the path leading to the end of dissatisfaction and suffering. By following and practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, understanding right thoroughly, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, we will overcome our dissatisfaction and suffering. Following this path, also known as the Noble Middle Path, we avoid the extreme searching happiness through a life of indulgence in desire and sensual pleasure, or the opposite extreme of trying to gain happiness and liberation by tormenting one's body and mind through unreasonable, unprofitable pain, forms of spirituality, self-mortification. The Noble Eightfold Path is a way to end the suffering. The middle way leads to the peace, lasting happiness, perfect wisdom, enlightenment, and nirvana. Insight into the fourth noble truth, no matter how profound, perfect, our conceptual knowledge of the path may be this way, not be sufficient. For the truth accomplishments, it is essential that we follow, cultivate, and practice the path of diligence, sincerity, and full confidence.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What you guys got out of it?
Should I move Angel or not?
Yeah, go ahead.
The dog took my shirt.
That it is possible. Follow, trust the process.
What am I trying to say here? He told us the cause. Can you imagine getting sick and no one tells you the cause?
Yeah.
You just don't feel good, and that's it.
What? Sacred.
Before we get serious, my husband and I went to a movie last night, the new one about the murders on the train. It was the goriest thing I've ever seen, but Brad Pitt kept quoting Buddhism. He kept talking about, I need to get to the temple, and he was quoting things that we've been talking about for the last few days. That made me laugh. I think I laughed one other time in the movie. I mean, it was horrendous, but here he is quoting Buddhism. That part was good.
This is very short, trust me, it looks dry. Nobody wants to look at this particular type of text because it brings you back to like 1950s. But I promise you all, it is very insightful. If you all want to bring your chairs towards this way real quick.
Okay, thank you. Just so I can read. That's good.
Once you grab your chair close to that laptop. It is you. All the way up there. I'm gonna control that laptop for a second. So I get all these media up and running real quick. Real quick. Hold on.
Yeah.
You stay right there. Can you do us the wonderful favor, because you have that manly voice, to read it, and as he's reading it, I want you to go down the list, and you can pause to take notes in it. I have found, in my years of teaching, I don't even know who wrote this, but it's on sacredtext.com, which gives you all of the texts of all religion, actually, the Bible and everything. And then when you go into the Buddhism realm, they have the Four Noble Truths. This is titled, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. It gets a little bit disorganized on the bottom, which we're not going to get to, but when it describes the first, second Noble Truth, see, the Noble Truth this does not do any justice to the Four Noble Truths, nor does 5 more books. The Noble Truth has to be read from different authors many times, over and over again, and then you have to ask yourself, what are they trying to say here with each sentence, as if you're reading the Constitution as a lawyer? Like, what are they trying to say? What are a founding father trying to say? You know? If you were charged with a crime for possession of marijuana, trust me, you would look up the state statutes on possession. And you would read every line and trying to find a defense for you. Okay? So here we are as suffering human beings, and I want everyone to really look at this close examination underneath the microscope, okay? Because, listen, I would never present something to you because I'm bored or that it is unnecessary, right? And I'm giving you all everything that I know in regards to my knowledge and my insight. But some things you have to see it for yourself, and this is one of them. And when you get down in the middle of the second or third noble truth, oh my goodness, these words have the power to actually penetrate someone's heart. No different than the gospel penetrating people's hearts in churches every Sunday. Today just so happens to be Sunday. So anyways, Heath, you can take over real quick while I set everything up here.
Thus has it been said by the Buddha, the Enlightened One. It is through not understanding, not realizing four things that I, disciples, as well as you, had to wander so long through this round of rebirths. And what are these four things? They are the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the extinction of suffering, the noble truth of the path that leads to the extinction of suffering. As long as the absolutely true knowledge and insight as regards these four noble truths was not quite clear in me, so long as I was not sure whether I had won that supreme enlightenment, which is unsurpassed in all the world with its heavenly beings, evil spirits, and gods, amongst all the hosts of ascetics and priests, heavenly beings and men. But as soon as the absolutely true knowledge and insight as regards these four noble truths had become perfectly clear to me, there arose in me the assurance that I had won that supreme enlightenment unsurpassed.
And by the way, when I don't think he uses bhikkhu in here, okay, which is good. But literally, these are the elements that substitute the Four Noble Truths. And when you're reading this, I want you all to really, these are the words of the Buddha, right? So very profound. But anyways, yeah, pay really close attention. Now we enter into the First Noble Truth.
So it says, and I discovered that profound truth, so difficult to perceive, difficult to understand, tranquilizing and sublime, which is not to be gained by mere reasoning, and is visible only to the wise. The world, however, is given to pleasure, delighted with pleasure, enchanted with pleasure. Verily, such beings will hardly understand the law of conditionality, the dependent origin of everything. Incomprehensible to them will also be the end of all formations. The forsaking of every substratum of rebirth, the fading away of craving, detachment, extinction, nirvana. Yet, there are beings whose eyes are only a little covered with dust. They will understand the truth. First noble truth, the noble truth of suffering. What now is the noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, decay is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair are suffering. Not to get what one desires is suffering. In short, the five groups of existence are suffering. What now is birth? The birth of beings belongs to this or that order of beings. Their being born, their conception, and springing into existence, the manifestation of the groups of existence, the arising of sense activity, this is called birth. And what is decay? The decay of beings belonging to this or that order of beings. They're getting aged, frail, gray, and wrinkled. The failing of their vital force, the wearing out of the senses, this is called decay. And what is death? The parting and vanishing of beings out of this or that order of beings. Their destruction, disappearance, death, the completion of their life period, dissolution of the groups of existence, the discarding of the body. This is called death. And what is sorrow?
I was just
Okay. What is sorrow? The sorrow arising through this or that loss of misfortune, which one encounters, the worrying oneself, the state of being alarmed, inward sorrow, inward woe, this is called sorrow. And what is lamentation? Whatsoever, through this or that loss or misfortune which befalls one, is wail and lament, wailing and lamenting. The state of woe and lamentation, this is called lamentation.
lamentation.
Lamentation, thank you. What is pain? The bodily pain of unpleasantness, the painful and unpleasant feeling produced by bodily contact. This is called pain. And what is grief? The mental pain and unpleasantness, the painful and unpleasant feelings produced by mental contact. This is called grief. And what is despair? Distress and despair arising through this or that loss of misfortune, which one encounters distressfulness and desperation. This is called despair. And what is the, quote, suffering of not getting what one desires? To being subjects to birth, there comes desire. Oh, that we were not subject to birth. Oh, that no new birth was before us, subject to decay, disease, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. The desire comes to them. Oh, that we were not subject to these things. Oh, that these things were not before us. But this cannot be got by mere desiring. And not to get what one desires is suffering.
That's it. That's all I want you to read. That's it. You're done. You guys can return your seats back to where you were. I mean, you read any more, you'll leave. Trust me.
You scared me.
Really? Oh, no. Frail, gray, weak. You read it, you're like, what is in store for me when I get older?
Don't get old, you won't like me.
Oh, I'm watching my mom. My mom is actually watching all of this unfold within her.
Yeah. How old's your mom?
She's 65.
Oh my, I'm 72.
Yeah, she's really watching this unfold.
Yeah. When you said you need to take that line by line, did you ask your guru, whoever, what things meant? Because it's gonna be our interpretation, which might not be right.
It's okay. We'll get to that.
In this lifetime.
We'll get together. That's why I'm here. I don't think I have forgot anything else. I think I'm pretty set with all of the media here. For people who are on YouTube, I'm gonna transfer. This is on my phone. I'm gonna go to my laptop here real quick and discuss even more. So I'm gonna deactivate my phone.